Hey, thanks for joining, watching. Today I'm going to be chatting with Alec Longstreth, who has just been in the comics game for a long time. He does Phase 7 comics, which is a self published series. Most of what he does, at least initially, is self published. Um, He spent years of his life on Basewood, which is a huge accomplishment, and he has spent the last few years starting on this new series. So we're gonna chat to him now. Just connecting.
Hey
Hey,
Mama, how's it going?
good. Yeah, how are you?
I'm hanging in there. Sort of a complicated time in the United States right now, but yeah, we're all hanging in.
Yeah, yeah. That must be like things are weird here as well, obviously, but it must just be so intense to kind of live in that climate right now.
Yeah, it's sort of I mean, I think they're interrelated, right? Like the
Yeah.
pandemic is sort of the bottle that bottled everything up, and then
Yeah.
sort of affecting people of color even more than the rest of us. So yeah, it's all. But no, I we don't have to talk about all the
No, I mean
fun
like
stuff. But yeah, it's
I'm
just
happy
it's
to
hard to be
talk
like, yeah,
about.
everything's great when like there's a lot of
Yeah.
hard stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean we can talk about anything. We don't have to just
cool.
talk about comics.
I saw you holding up some of my comics. I just want to say I pulled out my box of your comics,
Oh my God.
and I have stuff going back to 2010. So I thought
Wow.
that was pretty crazy. We've been pen pals for 10
I really
years
want
now.
yeah.
I believe this is the first time we've ever spoken live, right?
It is, yeah. Yeah, because I know you came to York, I think for your honeymoon like a few years ago.
Yeah.
Which isn't far from me, but obviously I'm not gonna gate crash your honeymoon.
I no, I feel bad on that trip. I only saw one cartoon as I saw Sean as a party when I was in
Right.
London. We like got a beer because he was around, but after I left, a couple people were like, "You were right near where I was. Why
Yeah,
didn't we
yeah.
hang out?" And it was, I was like focused on other things. But yeah,
I
I
know
hope
that
to
must
get back there soon.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I hope to get there someday as well. Yeah, I was wondering because was that your first time in England?
It was, yeah. It's sort of strange too, because I'm sort of is it Anglophile, like a Francophile, who's like in
Right.
love with France or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
I feel like all my favorite authors are English, and
Oh wow.
uh, I just like spend a lot of time thinking about it, or my ancestors are from there. So
Right.
I think it's funny because yeah, we went up to Langstreth, which is the sort of ancestral home of my family. It's sort of outside
Right.
of Skipton and then Hubberholm and then some
Yeah.
other tiny place. And it's like we finally got there. It's like sheep and a little river. And it's like this is where we come from or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I think my wife was sort of like, well, we can check that off the list. And I'm sort of like, man, I can't wait to go back. And I'd love to
Yeah.
figure out a way to do a residency up there or, find
Well,
enough money.
yeah, like I was just wondering because obviously yeah, I want to talk about so much of your stuff in depth, but with Basewood, like did you ever think about doing kind of like an international tour for that when that came out? Like, did you do a US tour for that?
Well, it's funny because the French edition actually came out first. So,
Oh, right. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so I don't know if you know David Liebens is a great Belgian cartoonist who's one of the
Mm.
founding members of L'Emploi du Mois, which is a
Oh,
Belgian.
right. I know them. Yeah. Oh,
And
cool.
so he was married to an American woman, and so every year they would come and visit her family. And so he found a couple copies of Phase 7, I think, at Jim Hanley's Universe, which I'm not sure is
Yeah,
still
yeah,
there
yeah.
in New
I
York
know
City.
that. Yeah.
Cool. And then he got in touch, and then through him, I met Max de Rodriguez, another Belgian cartoonist who works at
Yeah.
L'Emploi du Mois.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I did a collection of Phase 7 with them. And so then I was working on finishing base with it. So when that was finally done, it was like, hey, let's, do another
Yeah.
book.
Signed up.
And so
Yeah.
I actually went to Angoulême, and then we
Oh,
did like a
cool.
very small tour. We went up to Paris, and I signed a couple
Right.
copies at different bookstores there. And then we went up to Brussels, and did a couple signings there. So that was sort of the extent of any European
Yeah, yeah,
tour, and like all this stuff, it's like, well, I'm 90% of the way there. Why can't I just like go over to England and do some more
yeah,
stuff? But
yeah,
it just wasn't in the cards with work and everything. I had to get back.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, and so then I used the French edition, which is similarly sized, sort of oversized European
yes,
album format, and
yeah,
tried to
yeah,
sell that to other publishers in the US. And they're all like, "Are you crazy? You know, what if it was 6 inches by 9 inches and it was
yeah,
a
yeah,
paperback?" And it's sort of like, well, that's not what I want. So I ended up doing
yeah,
it myself and
yeah.
made it
I mean,
as a
like,
Kickstarter.
yeah, I don't want to kind of fan too much, but like when I was first discovering comics and making comics, you were like such a you just yeah, you're such an encouragement, and that's kind of like it's never felt like an obligation to like your readers or anything like that. And this is going back like 5, 6 years now, like since it was released.
Yeah,
Um,
2014, I think. Yeah.
and I still look at it and I'm just like, this does not get like enough praise because
Oh,
this is
thanks.
such like honestly, I remember like following your
The
page step
beard.
by step and your beard step by step, and I was just like, this is like fucking comics. This is like what it's all about. You like had this like real hard line, like dedication, like like I will die for comics. It was so inspiring, like to just see someone just put everything into like a page. Um, just I so my stepdaughter, she like loves this. She's read it
Oh,
3 times
great.
already. She only
Yay.
got that in March. And then I showed her Basewood, which she's read twice as well. And just honestly, every time I look at a page, I'm just like blown away by the detail. Like, how does it feel to look back on that? Like, it's creeping up closer to like a 10-year anniversary than a 5-year anniversary, right?
Yeah, I mean, I started writing it in 2004, and then it
Right.
took 7 years to draw. It's hard because thank you so much for all the kind words. It's nice to hear when people connect with it. For me personally, it's really painful to look at those pages because it was just like such a vast amount of labor. So
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, I really dislike that book. Or
Hmm.
it's funny holding up Isle of Elsie because it's like I I learned so many lessons on base sort of what not to do. And so then it
Yeah.
was like, because here I can actually, I'm in the room where they are. If you give me half a second,
Yeah, that would be
uh,
awesome.
I can pull out some pages just to give people an idea. So you're holding a
Yeah.
book which is 22 centimeters by
This
36 or
is like
something.
the size of my arm,
Right, and
basically.
this is so big I can't even get it in the camera. So this is, I'm
Jeez.
sorry, I don't know the metric, but it's 18 inches by 24. So that's how
Wow.
big the pages are. You know, they're bigger than me.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you see all that detail, it's because, an A4 piece of paper is like 2 panels or like 1.5 panels. Um,
Whoa.
so, uh, like, and that's just a beginner's mistake. That's just like, oh, I don't know, I guess I should draw it this big or
Yeah.
whatever. And then doggedly sticking to it and just being like, okay, well, I made this mistake and I got to see it through.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so with Isle of Elsie now, it's like, what if I worked a quarter of that size surface area
Right.
wise and simplified things and didn't cross hatch everything to death
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and so I'm much happier and more productive, and I feel like I'm headed in the right direction now. But no, obviously I have a lot of fondness for the story, but
Hmm.
I was very depressed when I was working on it, and it was
Right.
very kind of hard to make, and for a lot of reasons. So I'm glad people still like it. But yeah, when I hold the book, I'm just sort of like, oh no, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way about their old work.
Yeah. I always think that that must be so interesting because cartoonists see their work, they can only see it in a way that a reader can't. Like I've said this before with other cartoonists, it's like looking in the mirror and you're both seeing a totally different thing because you're not just seeing like 7 years of work or whatever. You're seeing like your blood, sweat, and tears that went into that, like those late nights. Like by the end of those like pictures on your Flickr, you just look like you're like about to drop dead. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you really put everything into it. So I recently got sent some stuff from 2010 from my old house.
Oh wow.
Um, and I think I noticed something that was like a hardcore reader would notice this like really subtle wink to future things to come. So I found this old
Oh yeah.
microcosm publishing.
Yeah, this
Um,
is now like my promotional postcard that I use for
yeah,
ILLC. I repurposed that image. If you open it, it's a wraparound cover, and then I like reversed it and turned
yeah,
it
yeah.
into this. So yeah, I still use
Um,
that image. Isn't that funny?
so was that even in 2010, you were already planning Isle of Elsie?
Yeah, so ILLC had a series of false starts. So I believe the first one is in 2009. I was contacted by Dark Horse Comics, an editor
Oh
named
wow.
Katie Moody, and they were doing this thing. It was back when MySpace was really big.
Yeah,
So it was
yeah.
Dark Horse MySpace Presents, and they used to sort of like publish the comics on MySpace, and then they would collect them into these books. But
Hmm.
they had someone cancel, and they were just like frantic, like we need 8 pages like yesterday.
Right.
And I had been thinking about, and what really happened was Basewood, as we mentioned, was so painful to get through in that. And the whole last year of it, I
Mm.
was just like in a fog. I was up in Vermont in this very isolated rural town, and there was nothing
Yeah,
going on. And I was just drawing comics all the time. And what helped me get through that was I had started rereading the comics of my childhood, which were Carl Barks, like Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck
right.
comics and stuff. And I was reading those and just going like, these are great, and they're fun to read, and there's these adventures, and like, why can't I be making comics
Mm.
like this instead of like depressing people killing themselves in the woods stuff?
Yeah,
And so I was like, man, I want to do something like this. And then I'd been kicking around this sort of dragon idea, and I'd even done one as far back as 2006. There's a really early version of the story that's the same
right.
kind of bones as that book you're holding up, but it's like not very thought through or whatever. It
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
very like even more heavy on wordplay and puns. It's almost unreadable because there's like a
Okay.
narrator making one level of puns, the characters are making another level. It's just like, ugh.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that was like 6 or 7 pages. And then I did this Dark Horse thing, and I was like, what if I just took those characters and it was like deadline pressure. It's like what cartoonists, live for. It's like we need
Yeah,
something yesterday. It's like
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so in a week, that whole world just sort of formed, and it was like I had the dragon and the wizard and the little boy, and they go on an adventure.
Wow.
And I had more fun drawing like that 8 page comic than the entirety of 7 years on Basewood. And
Wow.
so yeah, so what I did really was that whole last year or two that I was working on Basewood, just like it was written and everything. I was just sitting there
Right.
stippling giant pieces of paper or whatever, cross hatching. What I was doing in the morning is every morning I woke up and I was writing Isle of Elsie, and that's really what got me through it. It was like the hour that I had in the morning to do that creative work of
Yeah.
being excited about my next thing and where all the stuff I was learning and how I was going to apply it to my next thing.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
by the time Basewood was done, I had basically the first 100-page story that is in that book was
Wow.
written, but then I didn't actually draw it until many years later,
Right.
because I guess I finished in 2011, and then the first page of Isle of Elsie didn't go up on it's like a web comic. I release
Yeah.
each page on a Thursday,
Mhm.
and that didn't go up till 2016. So it took another 6 years to or
Wow.
5 years to kind of finally commit to doing it.
You always, yeah, you always seem like you've got these really long-term plans with your comics, and you can see really like far ahead into the future. So, um, yeah, with Isle of Elsie, like, do you kind of know, okay, this is gonna end up being, so this is volume one, and this only just recently came out. Like, do you know, okay, this is gonna be in the end 700 pages, it's 7 issues, or are you just is there some like looseness with it and you're just seeing where it's going or how many years you're into the storyline?
Yeah, I think what I'm actually trying to do is like totally change my thinking. Like there's like a weird thing. I don't know if it's the same over in the UK, but when you tell someone you're working on a project, their first question is like, "How many pages is it?" And I feel like we have this weird defensiveness of like, "Is it a graphic novel or not?"
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the buzzword, and it's like this club, and you want to get into that club and be like, "I'm working on a graphic novel because it sounds cool." Um, but I had like this really weird, profound experience. I was at there's this place in Ohio called the Billy Ireland Library, sorry, Billy Ireland Cartoon
Yeah,
Library and Museum. And
yeah,
they
yeah.
host the Crossroads Columbus Festival there each year. And so I was out for that festival, and they did a tour of their amazing archives, and they have, oh, behind this wall is all the original art for Calvin and Hobbes, and they're pulling open drawers, and it's,
Whoa.
Winsor McCay pages and Charles Schultz, and just, it was totally, I was just crying through the whole thing. I was just like, oh, this is amazing. And then they had this sort of mixer, with drinks and stuff, and they pulled out
Right.
a bunch of original art. And there was a page of Prince Valiant, which I'm not sure anyone's
Yeah,
familiar
yeah,
with, but it's like
yeah.
an old newspaper, a Sunday page kind of strip, and it's a big piece of original art, sort of similar basewood level, kind of like tons of cross hatching stuff. And I don't care about Prince Valiant. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, whoever drew that. It's
Yeah,
not like
yeah,
I've never read a page of it. I've never gotten through a page of it because I'll start it and
yeah,
just be like, oh, who cares? It's
yeah,
like super
yeah,
detailed, big paragraphs of text. It's not my
yeah.
bag. But I was looking at it and I was like, wow, this cartoonist like put in a ton of work, as much work as they could in a week, and then like
Hmm.
sent this off to the newspaper. And then each week there was a new installment, and over 50 years they
Yeah,
built a narrative. And so
yeah,
it's like that's the mindset I'm trying to get back to. And it's funny that it has to go on the internet via like a web comic, which feels distant from the past of comics, but it's
yeah,
actually, I feel like a circle where it's come back to sort of like what is a humanly sustainable amount of cartooning. Because like Basewood, if I tried to just like make another Basewood, I wouldn't make it, and it would not happen, and it was unsustainable, it was unhealthy.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and I have all these students. I work at the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction, Vermont, and a lot of students are, you have this graphic novel fever of like, I want to make something big or whatever, but then they don't ever check in with themselves of like, what is a sustainable amount of cartooning that I can do? And so they set these unrealistic goals of I'm going to do 4 pages a week or whatever, and they, and you can do that when you're young and you're in grad school and you don't have a lot of other life
yeah,
responsibilities. But I have like 2 kids now. I have a day job. So yeah, I was sort of returning to this idea of newspaper comics models where it's like Charles Schultz showed us you can draw 4 panels, 6 days a week, and one Sunday page for 50 years
yeah,
without, he took one break, I think, in his 70s for a little bit or something. But like, you can do that for 50 years. So for Isle of Elsie, and this is like the longest answer ever, and I apologize. But for
hmm,
Isle of Elsie, my thinking is more just like, I want to put out 1 page a week and hopefully just do that for the rest of my life.
wow,
And that's 50 pages a year. Every 3 years there'd be a book. I'm
yeah,
40, so I don't know if I can get through the next 30 years and keep cartooning. My
yeah,
wrist doesn't fall apart. I could hopefully get out another 10 volumes or something. But
awesome.
yeah, I think of it in large terms of world building and things that I want to happen. I've only scratched the surface with the first book, so I hope it's kind of like a ongoing thing. But
Yeah,
it is fun and messy, and I'm still improvising in each book. It's not like I have some document that's like, and then in volume 10 this happens, and that's, I have to stick to that plan.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
try to balance like planning out some stuff, but still having fun and improvising it.
Because I'm always curious, and we're both parents now, and when you're first starting to make comics, it's just like I'm just gonna make it. In the first collection of Phase 7, you do like one about graffiti, and I was looking back on the early Idle Sucks, and I was just like, I would never make this now, but whatever. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, and as you get older, you start to be like, okay, well, I've only got a certain amount of time left, so I'm gonna kind of pick the stories that I really want to tell. Um, how are you finding that now, that balance of like, well, I can't just stay up until 3 a.m. and draw comics like I have 2 kids now. How are you finding that balance? How old are your kids?
2 and 4.
Okay, so 4 years
Yes.
of being a parent.
Yeah. So we're still in that really hard. How old is your daughter?
She is 10 now. Yeah,
And oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah,
So like we haven't even made it to primary school, elementary school,
yeah,
which I think at least what I've seen from the comics community is sort of the promised land for cartoonists, where it's like they have kids, they disappear for 6 years, and then when their kid goes off to kindergarten, it's like, oh my gosh, now my kid's like at school all day, and
yeah,
suddenly I can like do my day job during the day and draw some comics at night and catch
yeah.
up or whatever. So we're still not quite there. Um,
Working out the
so for
like
me, again, it's
structure.
just like consistency of trying to get like my wife Claire gives me 90 minutes in the morning, and it's like I don't care if the
Right.
house is burning down, like the door is closed. I am drawing right now. Please
Yeah,
don't come in
yeah,
here because that's all I have. And so, but I've worked out by tying everything we're talking about, by simplifying my style, by drawing smaller, by not cross-hatching. I've been able to get a page of ILC done each week. I just draw it during
Wow.
the week. So, I post on Thursday. That morning I wake up and lay out the next page. Friday I start penciling. I finish penciling
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday, start inking on Monday. I'm done with inking by Tuesday, Wednesday, color it Wednesday night, post on Thursday. So I've done that for 4.5 years, and so
Wow.
now I have a book and 100 pages on the webcomic. I'm, most of the
Yeah.
way through the next book. So, but
That's impressive.
the thought of
Honestly.
my daughter being out of the house and being like gone at school for 8 hours, it's like, oh my gosh, I could like build up a buffer and I could like
Yeah,
take a
you'll
break or
finish a graphic
something.
novel in a week.
Yeah,
It is, yeah, I think cartoonists' partners have like the patience of a saint because they kind of they just give you that window to kind of work on whatever you're working on. Um, and yeah, that time will come when like Emma's right now, she's in her room just playing like Pokemon on the Switch, and I can be down here doing stuff like this. So that time does come. Um, so yeah, I also wanted to say your model of, I think you talk about it in your book Transition. I mean, you talk about so much in that, but you talk about like you have to treat it like a job, like to draw comics. Like you have to get up at 8 a.m. and then get your lunch break at 12 o'clock, take an hour break to do nothing with comics, and then work for another 4 hours. And whenever I'm getting like a bit sloppy with comics, like putting it on the back burner, I always go back to that model because it's just like the only way you're gonna get comics done is if you just sit down and draw the goddamn thing. Like there are no shortcuts.
yeah.
Um, yeah, honestly, like your comics were so well and still are. Like I think I see them almost like nostalgia now because they were one of the first things I discovered like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And not only are they still like a breath of fresh air, but they're such a like I feel like I'm learning about comics as I'm reading them. Because it seems like you've studied the history of comics a lot. Like I know you just said about White River Junction, and CSS. Like so you teach there now, but you were a student there beforehand.
I was a fellow. So yeah, so while I was working on Basewood, I had done the first two chapters, and then I was in the middle of chapter three. I was living in New York City, and then they
Right.
granted me a fellowship. So I went up, and it's sort of a weird position because like I did attend every class because I was for free basically. It was like you're in the
Really.
school, but you don't have to pay for it. So I was like, okay. So yeah, I took Steve Bissette's history class, and I sat through all these classes. But because I had teaching experience, they sort of also were like, why don't you teach these two classes while you're a fellow? And so then
Hmm.
I hung out for 4 years and was on the faculty teaching a variety of classes. And then my girlfriend, now wife, and I moved back to California because she wanted to sort of get out of there. So I taught remotely for 4 more years, and now I'm the director of academic outreach, which is more of an admin position. So I'm not
Right.
doing as much teaching, but I'm still very involved in the school. We're like currently trying to get our summer workshops online and everything,
Yeah, yeah,
dealing with the pandemic and everything.
yeah. That must be nuts.
Yeah.
Um,
But no,
so
for me, the whole thing is draw comics every day. That's
yeah,
the thing that's kept me sort of productive especially during these last 4 years with kids and
yeah,
stuff, where you're just like not getting any sleep and tired. And it's like, even if you sit down for 15 minutes and you just like draw something 3 times and have to erase it 3 times, at least you touched the work, at least you're connected during that time, you're thinking about it. And so when you come back the next day, it's easier to get back in that flow. And
yeah.
I'm sitting right in front of it, so I might as well pull it out. So I mean, I started that in 2002, and so I have like these are my sheets where I just make a calendar. It says slacking off. And this is July 2002, and then on the 13th of July, I started writing down, and so I basically just don't go to bed until I write down what comics I drew. And so, there's
Holy shit.
9 years of it, and then here's another folder with another 9 years of it. So, that's how you make a graphic novel, kids,
Yeah,
or whatever. So, that's like 18 years of drawing comics literally every day. And every
yeah,
once in a while, there's a red X where I miss a day
yeah.
because I'm moving cross
Life.
country or I'm breaking up with my girlfriend or whatever's going on. Life gets in the way. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
trying to sort of centralize it in my life so that I take it seriously because it's so easy. It's hard to draw comics. It's much easier to not draw comics, right? It's
Yeah.
easier to just wake up and go like, oh, I'll do something else today instead of like forcing myself to sit here
Yeah.
by myself and draw. So,
Do you think cartoonists know how to like relax? Like, can you ever just sit and watch a film and your head's not like the cogs are turning of like, okay, like I need to really like work on this page. Like, I know so many cartoonists who just can't just you feel guilty for like taking a break or something. Like, do you think your mind works like that?
I think I'm getting better at it. It has for many years, for like
Hmm.
decades, but yeah, it's hard. Like it is so much. It's so much work to create a book. Like all cartooning is time. Like once you figure
Hmm.
out, how to draw and render your stuff and get it to reproduce correctly, and you've got your thing figured out, all it is time. It's literally like how long are you capable of sitting in a chair and getting this done or whatever. And
Yeah.
so once you have that realization, it's hard because like I just remember at one point I was like hanging out with some friends and they're like, let's sit around and play a card game, and I just was like, I can't do that anymore. I
Yeah.
can't like sit and play a board game because like all I like exit my body and I look at it in ghost form and it's like all I see is like you could set up an algorithm that rolls the dice and the game could play itself. I don't need to be here for that or whatever.
Right,
And all
right,
it's
right.
gonna do is like eat up 2 hours that I could be like drawing, which I know
Yeah.
makes me sound like the Grinch or whatever. But
No, I totally get it. Yeah.
yeah, where so it's I'm
Um,
always sort of like bouncing my leg and like I could be drawing right now. But like having kids has been really great for me. My wife Claire is really good at just being like, hey, there's more to life than sitting around drawing comics or whatever.
yeah.
So I am getting better at it, but it also takes effort.
Yeah.
It's or just the complexity of life getting more chaotic has been good, I think, in some ways.
Yeah.
Or a lot of what I talk to my students about is like, if all you do is sit in a room and draw comics, then you might have a great story to tell to start that process, but by the end of that process, you now have nothing to talk about because your life
Yeah.
experience is sitting in a room. And people like Carl Barks, who are some of the best cartoonists that ever lived, he didn't draw
Hmm.
his first page of comics till he was 41, and he had
Oh, wow.
20 different jobs. He was a lumberjack and a cowboy, and he was riding the rails and bouncing all over the country
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
any odd job he could during the Great Depression and stuff. So by the time he sat down at 41, he had that wellspring of experience and
right,
life,
right,
and he could then sit down and crank out 25 years of work.
right.
So
Yeah,
I don't know. The stuff that feels like a distraction is actually probably feeding your work and making you a better cartoonist,
yeah,
but that can be hard. You got to find the balance.
yeah,
You got to find a healthy, sustainable amount of cartooning, but that also allows you to like live your life and
yeah. No,
not be
that's
a
yeah.
comics making robot.
No, honestly, that's really like good food for thought. Like, yeah. So I think this is the most recent Phase 7.
hmm
Alec does four
3 years
issues.
ago. Ah.
Oh, really? Wow,
Yeah.
God, that's flown. Yeah, but also, I mean, come on, like you've been
No, I put
productive.
out another book, but still, it's been three
Yeah.
years since Phase 7. It's like breaking my heart.
Well, I'm like subscribing to the next four issues after this. So what is the next issue after? So 24 will be the next one.
Uh-huh.
What's the
So
plan for the next one?
I'm actually like in the middle of this. I don't know if I sent this to you. I should send you this if I haven't already. But I think I have a letter I need to respond to you. But I made this little state of the mini comic address, and it's like trying to like rethink this moment of Phase 7. Well, it's been 3 years that I haven't
Ah,
done an issue, because
right.
the plan is I have this really big story. So in my early 20s, I felt like Star Wars had saved my life. I was sort of suicidally depressed. And one of the things that got me through that, even though it's like the worst movie ever, is the release of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Um, and I was like, I want to see that movie. And for people that were alive before that movie came out, there was all this anticipation. It was like the first new Star Wars movie in
Hmm.
16 years. And so I felt like it sort of saved my life. And so I wanted to like give back to that. So I actually like moved to Australia to try and work on Episode 3. And it was this big adventure and all this stuff. And I think it's a pretty interesting story in terms of autobio stuff because not many people have been on that path. And I moved to
Yeah,
Los Angeles, like worked in the movie industry as a set carpenter and stuff, and
yeah,
all these strange things happen to me. But I've wanted to tell that story for a long time, and so I started scripting it. And similar, I've done like that book Weezer Fan that's like about my relationship with the band
yeah, yeah.
Weezer. This is sort of
Great.
the same thing, but like Star Wars.
Yeah,
And so I've started scripting out, and it's similar. It was during that same time when I had all this free time before I had kids and everything. While I was writing Isle of Elsie, I was scripting out this story for Phase 7. So I have like 5 issues ready to go, ready to
Right.
draw. I just don't have the
Right.
time
Right.
to draw them. Um,
Yeah.
and so the plan was to start serializing that. But there's also like this weird pressure of, I don't know, it could be 20 issues or something, so just like there's like this really intimidating thing about Phase 724 where it's like, oh my God, this is the first chapter of the next 20 issues, but what if I feel like drawing something else, or just like getting back on that treadmill of being locked into this larger narrative was really stressful. And so I think what I'm getting closer to deciding is like I'm gonna start making Phase 7 a lot messier instead of
Right.
this neat, chapter 1, chapter 2, and they come together in a
Yeah.
perfect
Yeah.
book and it's all planned out. It's going to be
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I threw my hourly comics in there, or I had a fun idea for a one-page comic. It's in
Yeah.
there. It has nothing to do with the larger story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then maybe when that larger story is done, pull those pages out, make a book, and then
That's
put the
great.
rest of everything else into a separate book. So it's sort of like
Yeah.
creating 2 books at once. Because like, I don't know. I'm just at a point like I want making comics to be fun. Like I have so much fun working on Isle of Elsie. I'm having fun while I'm drawing. I'm having fun while I'm thinking about it. I love reading it with my daughters. People
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
telling me they're reading it with their kids, which just like warms my heart and makes me feel
Yeah. It's
awesome.
great. It's great.
So it's like, man, what if I could feel good making Isle of Elsie and Phase 7 instead of
Yeah.
like Isle of Elsie's fun, but I use that fun to get through the drudgery of making Phase
Right.
7.
Right.
So if I could just be having fun all the time, that's like the ideal scenario. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm working on. I just figured out what the cover image is going to be. It's going to be like me as a cowboy getting thrown off the horse, being like woof, like hitting the
Yeah.
ground, and
Yeah.
like my cowboy
I
hat's
can
going
see it.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And then on the back cover, it's going to be me like back in the saddle again, but maybe on my comics turtle. The analogy for
That's
comics
exactly
is
what I
like
was
going
thinking of.
forward on
Yeah.
the turtle very
Yeah.
slowly. Instead of a horse or something. So that's sort of
Yeah.
the mission statement. And it's just going to be like, welcome to the new Phase 7. It's incredibly messy and my life is complicated right now. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, also, like, I don't think any of your readers are gonna pick up Phase 7, 24, 25, 26, and be like, no one's gonna be angry and be like, hold on, like 50% of this is leading to a like graphic novel, and the other 50% is like one-page comic strips. Like, I think like if people love your work, they love your work, and like I enjoy seeing other cartoonists put out issues like that where it feels like this isn't a one kind of story 24-page thing or whatever. Like if they like your work, they like your work. No one's going to be like, oh man, like I want a 50-page graphic novel part one in
Right.
here.
Well, that was the other thing is like Phase 7 issues when I started. When I started it in 2002, I was like, I'm going to put out 4 issues a year. They're going to be 24 pages and just like, random whatever, and it'll be fun. And then slowly over the years, it's been like I've had issues that were 68 pages,
Right. Wow.
52 pages or whatever, where it's like the page count crept up. And that's also intimidating of just like, oh, I got to do the next issue, but it's got to be 48 pages to be satisfying.
Right.
And that's a whole year of work. Whereas like, I think they're going to be messier, shorter, and more frequent. The goal is like, hey, I
That
got 20
sounds great.
pages here. It's maybe not where I thought I was going to get to,
Yeah.
but like that's enough to staple together and mail it out and just be in touch with people more frequently and
Yeah.
trying to get back to sort of basics on that, I think, is the
Yeah.
goal.
I think it's also okay for it to, 5 years down the line, you change the rules again. Like sometimes I look at King Cat and I'm like, this story is not doing it for me, but it's like it works for John. So it's kind of like it's down to you, isn't it? Like if as
Yeah.
long as you're entertaining yourself, like kind of an audience, I think will just always follow suit. And like even if that issue of King Cat doesn't work for me, like the next one will, or I can appreciate like what Porcelino was trying to do in that issue. Um,
Yeah, and I've
so
talked to
another,
him where he was like, "Oh, it'd be fun to do like an all poetry issue," and it's like,
yeah,
you should do that. It's your thing. You can do whatever you want. Like, there's no rule.
yeah,
It has
yeah,
to be X amount comics or whatever. It's like,
yeah,
I sometimes those weird issues, like, oh, it's in a totally different format because, like, I'm working on picture books and stuff now that I'm reading so many with my children, and I write poetry and do little
Mhm.
illustrations to go with them. It's like I could see starting to bring some of that stuff into Phase 7, and like, that's weird. This is kind of like a picture book in a mini comic. It's like, okay, well, who says you're not allowed to do that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important in order for comics to keep moving forward is to mess with the formula and to break those, rules that we kind of as cool as like understanding comics is, it's also reminding us like these are kind of the guidelines, but also the guidelines don't matter. Like you can do whatever you want. Um,
Totally, and,
so
and like it's the benefit of self-publishing, right? Because
yeah.
like if Phase 7 was published and I had to run everything by an editor, and I'd be like, hey, I'm gonna start messing it up and putting in random one-page things that have nothing to do with this larger narrative, they'd be like, whoa, 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 let's
Yeah.
rethink this. We'll give you some extra time to get it done so that you can stay on format or whatever. It's like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
my
yeah.
book, I can do whatever I want. I'm the
Yeah.
one paying for it. I'm the one mailing it out to
Yeah.
everyone. So
Yeah. Um, so how long, because I know every year you do a 24-hour comic. How
uh-huh.
many years have you been doing that for now?
I drew the first one in 2000, and I've done
Oh,
it every year. So I
Jesus
haven't done it.
Christ.
I haven't done it this year, so I guess I can never do that math. It's either 20 or 19. But
I mean
also
it,
the couple last years have been a little similar, messy and off format. You know, when I used to do it, I was very like by the book, like, okay, start the clock and 24 pages and 24 consecutive hours, and that's it. What I've mostly been doing the last couple years is doing drafts of picture books where like
mm,
as we've been talking about, I don't have the time to work on very many things. But my wife Claire can be like, okay, you're drawing a comic today. I usually start at midnight and I just work all night so that I'm getting the
right. Yeah.
bulk of the work done and before everyone gets up in the house. And then I'm sort of like tightening things up and trying to finish stuff as the rest of the day is progressing. But what I've mostly been doing is like I'll have an idea for a picture book and I'll be jotting down ideas for it and stuff. And then I will just like dump out a draft in 24 hours.
Right.
And it's usually very bad, poorly written, and not well drawn, but at least the idea is there. It's
Yeah.
like the analogy I've heard is if you've ever spun a pot on like a spinning wheel, it's like throwing the lump of clay down. And so now I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
something, right? And
Yeah.
it's starting to
Yeah.
spin. And then I guess the idea is someday when my daughter goes to school or whatever, then I can come back and be like, oh, here's a really horrible first draft,
Yeah.
but at least the bones
That's
are
so
there and I can
smart.
start. So, so I still
That's
do it
such a
every
good
year.
idea.
There's just something about it that's magical of just like, you have 24 hours go and like, the
Mm,
creativity and just like pulling ideas out and you get into the weird halfway point where you're so tired and you're just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And then you come back and look at it. But I will say having kids, not getting enough sleep in general, and then having to like do an all day thing or pull an all nighter, it's
yeah.
definitely wearing on me the last couple of years. I know everyone's like, wow, 20 years, keep doing it. I sort of like maybe I'll just do 20 years and then like take a break, and I can
Yeah.
always come back to it. But
Yeah,
the
totally.
last couple of years, it's been like I'm not gonna do it, and then like a couple days before New Year's, I'll be like, hey, I'm gonna do it, and then I do it because I don't want to let that tradition die. But yeah, it's been
Yeah.
hard. I'll just say that the last couple of years, it's been kind of hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's some dedication, honestly. I did it shortly after getting into your work. I was like, I want to do this. Yeah, I did it. I did it once, and I finished this comic, which I never actually printed. I think it was more just a good exercise. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, like I'm burnt out. Like 24 hours is a long time to stay up at 20, never mind 30, 40.
Right.
Um, with
But it
your
also mirrors our other conversation about basewood. Like when I started that, I used to do an 11 by 14 page and I would put 6 panels. And so it's like you have 10 minutes for each panel. And I would use the whole hour to do the whole page. And so it was
right,
like I was taking 3 minute bathroom breaks where I would run to the bathroom and come
yeah,
back.
yeah,
And I used the entire 24 hours or whatever. And then it was like, oh, you could do 4 panels, you know, and
yeah,
now suddenly you have 15 minutes per panel or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
I'm now doing picture books where I'm doing like a image per hour, and that's
yeah,
counting as a thing. And cumulatively, you know, to a well-organized mind, picture books are comics.
yeah,
So I still count it, even though I'm sort of bending the rules. But
mhm,
you know, I've simplified that. I draw it smaller. You know, you don't have to do you can't do your normal comics. You have to simplify
mm,
it. So like that's another thing I learned over those many years. It's like, oh, don't draw 11 by 14. Draw, you know, half of A4. Take an A4 and turn it on its side and put 2 pages on there. Because
Right.
the smaller you draw, the faster you are. And then suddenly it's like,
Yeah.
you can do a 24-hour comic in 16 hours. You
Yeah.
just have to get it done in 24 hours. It doesn't mean you have to use 24 hours.
Yeah.
So there's a way to like do that smartly and still have fun and still get something done and then like go get 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah. That's awesome, honestly. Yeah. Got it. Like, so I've been doing this thing the last few years. I think in the last five, I've done it for four out of the five. I think I took a break in 2017 or something, or 2018, but I've been trying to put out four comics a year. Um, which that that wasn't the plan, but the first year, 2015, that just every all of these comics were finishing themselves at the same time. It was like
Yeah.
I need to kind of email you and work out what I've sent you, but like it was like Olive and
Yeah,
transgender step
Olive.
parent. And,
Mhm.
yeah. And so I was like, I'm gonna do this like every year. I'm gonna put out four comics, and this year I've finished four now. I finished three. So, and I'm like, that's still pretty impressive. But I feel like you're the same. Like you're pretty hard on yourself. Like you can't see the like. You're like look. You can't even look back at like the piles of mountains of like paper that you've done, and you're like, yeah, but I only did like 2 pages this week. I suck or something like that. Um, yeah, it's just it's an incredible workload. Do you hold on to all your like finished pages, or do you ever sell them at like conventions or?
I haven't really. I don't know why. I there's like a weird like my greatest mentor was, if I can get the tripod up, is Aaron Rainier. There's a piece of
Mhm.
his art on the wall.
Yeah,
He's sort of
you
like
did the
my,
coloring. You did
yeah,
the
for
coloring
Walker
for
Bean.
his. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and he I don't know, he's been sort of my comics big brother where I sort of look up to him and I've learned so much from him. And he does a thing that I think he learned from Craig Thompson where when he finishes a page, he flips it over and does basically a diary entry and just says like, here's what's going on in my life right now as I'm finishing this page or whatever. But it
Oh
also
wow.
makes it so that he would like never sell an original because there's all sorts of personal stuff sort of in there
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
like it is his document. Like I have all the Basement originals. I've never sold any. I
Wow.
donated the cover to the Center for Cartoon Studies when it was done. I
Hmm.
don't know why. It's a revenue stream. I know a lot of cartoonists. It's like, oh yeah, I
Yeah,
can't wait to finish stuff and turn it in so that I can then sell the art. Um,
yeah,
but I always have a day job, so I guess I just don't have that financial pressure. I don't know. I'm not sure there's much demand for it. Or
mm,
the thing I've heard also that's sort of heartbreaking is like if I was like, hey, the Basewood pages are for sale. It's like I know exactly which pages would get chosen. It's the splash page of the tree and the
right,
treehouse, and
right,
this one has a cool composition. It's more of an art thing that you'd want to see on your
right.
wall, and then you're stuck with like continuity pages of characters talking or whatever.
Yeah,
And so it's like it's also heartbreaking to think of like all the good pages going off to other people and then not having it.
yeah,
So I don't know. I'll
yeah,
I'll tell my kids to like throw them in a pile and burn them when I die, or donate them somewhere, or whatever. Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah. Donate them, don't burn them, Jesus. Um, with like all your work, um, just I mean, just any page. I don't even need to kind of like pull anything out. Like with just any page, like in general, um, how many times are you kind of? This is something Emma's using as a bookmark currently.
Okay.
Um, how much are you kind of like re-editing like the script, or are you kind of like you loosely know what you're doing, like, um, or like over here you've got like all these like big puffs of magic.
Mhm.
How much, how many times do you kind of like go over a page, so to speak, and kind of go like, actually, like I'm gonna move that up here. I'm gonna make this panel. There's a really nice one I saw. I'm sure I won't be able to find right now, but like was this originally going to be like 6 panels, and you were like, actually, I'm gonna like blow this up and make it a 4 panel page.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the wrong room to give you a full rundown, but let me see if I think I have a folder. I have like I'm sitting in front of a filing cabinet, which I believe has some of my comic stuff.
Cool.
But basically, I scripted out on just sort of A4 paper, Oh, whoops, maybe I don't. Or here's a page of, here's my Phase 721 script. And so what I usually do is I have on just A4 paper like a rough version of the page mapped out. And it's
Right.
fairly detailed. All the writing's in there. I'm just not spending a lot of time on, you know, the actual drawing. But
Yeah,
you'd be
yeah.
surprised. I feel like there's sort of like first mind is best mind kind of a thing. Like when
Right.
I'm just, there's no pre-planning before this other than like a text outline that's like this happens, this happens.
Hmm.
Um, but I often come back to that initial one and I'm like, whoa, that's a good expression, and I stick pretty closely to it. I'm also in a weird transition with my process for Phase 7 where I'm starting to do this thing. I did it in, I think I actually did it with this issue where I take that rough and then I scan it and then I print it onto the Bristol board in blue
Right.
line, and then I just skip pencils and I go straight to inks. Because what I usually
Well,
do is I have that rough version, then I pencil it on the page, then I ink it, then I scan it
yeah,
and color
yeah.
it. But there's so much energy, and I often feel like, oh, that first rough draft had all this life and gesture, and
Yeah, yeah,
everything. And
yeah.
then I lose it when I repencil, and then I lose it even more when I ink on top of that. So I'm trying to get to a point, or this is another intimidating thing about the new Phase 6 storyline is like, I want to jump in and do it, but I'm determined. I actually changed my scripting process so that it's proportional to the size it's going to be printed. So
Right.
that because I didn't do that on that one, so it's like I printed on the page, but it's the wrong thing, so I have to like squish a panel down. But so I have to do all these calculations. I ended up penciling a little bit, but yeah, I'm gonna try. It's like such a French thing. Like when I went over to Angoulême, I remember they want the dédicace, the really nice drawing in the book or something. And I took
Yeah,
out my
yeah.
pencil and started kind of like roughing the character. And I remember my friend Max was like, "Oh, really? You gotta like use a pencil to do your character that you've drawn 1,000 times?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay,
Yeah.
geez, because all those guys, they're just like, oh, look at me, I'm drawing everything
Yeah.
perfectly or whatever."
Yeah.
So that was like very hard for me to just like draw directly with ink. But I'm trying to get better because there's just more life when you draw like that. So I'm trying to just like skip penciling, just go
Yeah.
straight from thumbnails that have all that life and energy is proportional, drop it in, and then I do a thing where so the drawing is 10% cyan. I put lettering guidelines that are
Mhm.
10% yellow, so that like all the lettering's there. I don't have to like get out a names guide and put in my guidelines. I can just go straight in with ink for lettering,
Right.
and then the red is the panel borders, like the actual panel borders. So I don't have to rule anything out. I just print it out and can go straight to ink. So,
Well,
and I want to do that for Isle of Elsie too. I'm just not quite there yet. Like Phase 7 is mostly pictures of myself, which I've drawn thousands of pages of at this point.
hmm,
So it's like I
hmm.
can do that in my sleep. But Isle of Elsie is still like, whoa, I'm still getting to know the characters and how to draw them. But
Yeah,
that's the goal someday, is to like not have penciling as part of my process.
yeah. No, I mean, that's a great shortcut. I started doing something, I think I saw Jeffrey Brown do actually, where it's, I'll see if I've got it actually. Um, just because measuring out a page is always just, well, maybe I don't have it here. Um, I'll show you whatever I'm working on. Um, I can't even think what the paper's called, but where it's like grid paper.
Uh-huh.
'Cause I was so tired of just measuring out and calculating the pages all the time. Um, so instead, I just did it once, and
Mm-hmm.
then
Like a template.
yeah, and then so now I can just kind of just put it through on a light box, and
Yeah.
then like occasionally I'll just mix it up a little bit, but it's just made getting the artwork done so much faster.
Yeah, no, I
Uh,
built one with animation peg bars. It's been my thing lately. So uh, I have the template the same way as you, with like my 4 tiers that I use for Isle of Elsie. It's got the lettering lines all in it, and then it's pre-marked for half tier and third
right,
tiers. But then I 3-hole punch it, and I have an animation peg bar. And so the template is pegged, and then the Bristol board is pegged. And so it aligns perfectly. And so then you can do all
right,
that. But then the nice thing is you can unpeg it, work it. But if you need to like move a speech balloon over, you repeg it and it's instantly realigned. And so then the lettering is like back where you need it, and all your lines are there, and you don't have to do anything. Shapes, like for me, probably half an hour off every page.
Wow.
So those little efficiencies, that's like how I'm able to keep up with these deadlines and do a page
Yeah.
each week. So yeah, I tell my students there's like layers of cartooning, right? Like one is just like, what is the story? What are the characters? And trying to draw stuff. And then the second
Hmm.
layer is you need to have kind of an out of body experience and be like sitting there watching yourself working, like, why are all my tools, I'm right-handed, why are all my tools on the left side? And why am I constantly reaching across my body to grab everything I need? Why don't
Yeah.
I rearrange my workspace so that they're right here? Maybe that shaves off 1 second of grabbing and
Yeah.
coming back. But if you can shave a second off something that you do 600 times a day for 20 years, you just like
Yeah.
drew another graphic novel or whatever,
Yeah.
that stuff counts. So,
Yeah. Like it's the same with music. Like I know we both I don't know, do you still make music or is that kind of Oh yeah, because you
yeah.
did the music for Basswood.
Yeah, I did songs from the bass with my friend Andy. He did most of the music. I helped him write and stuff. I did like demos for that. I mean,
Right.
I like last year I was in a community band out here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was playing my trumpet, and I still play guitar and piano with my
Right.
daughters almost every day. But I'm not like in a
Yeah.
band or anything. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's still part of my
But
life.
even just that, like I record like at home, and even just setting that up is like, okay, I'm all done. Oh, I need to go back into this room, and it's like I can't have a permanent like studio setup or anything. Like even with my comics, and it's just trying to get those things in place so I don't have to keep getting up and like, oh, get this paper, get these pens, get the watercolors. Um, you started doing something a few years ago that is something I would love to do as well with comics and also people's music. Is you started publishing other people's work under Phase 8.
Yeah.
Was that just from seeing friends and cartoonists work that you admired and you were like, no one's putting this out, I'm gonna do it?
Yeah, I think, or it's just I've built up this skill set over the last 18 years of doing Phase 7, where it's like for me, okay, I finished 3 issues of the mini comic and now I collect them into a book. I use lulu.com, I upload the files, I get a print on demand
Mhm.
book, it has an ISBN, it's on Amazon, like that to me is not, I do that a couple of times a year with various things. And so
Mhm.
for me, like that's not an intimidating process. I think the main thing with Phase 8 is just like, I again, my time is super limited, so I'm doing like one book a year, if that.
Yeah,
But it's like finding people that don't have that skill set, who don't have InDesign on their computer and have the privilege of the access to the software and technology and scanners and whatever,
right.
and just sort of trying to be like, hey, basically the touchstone is like this book wouldn't exist unless I do that work for somebody.
Right.
So, and then I had been thinking about it as something that I could possibly do. And then basically it was just my friend Gabby Schultz was super depressed, and he just like posted this comic that was, it's like the comic you would draw the night before you kill yourself. And that's something I've dealt with, and I've been in that mindset before. And so I
Hmm.
just reached out to him. I was like, hey, I really like the comics you're posting. Like, we should start a book. And it was more an excuse to just be in touch with Gabby a lot, um, because
Right.
he's always posting stuff or whatever, but there was no direction. He wasn't working towards a book, and he seemed really depressed. And so it's like more just a thing of like, I don't know. I'm not sure I was totally ready to start it, but I was like, let's just do it. We'll make a book. I'll call it Phase 8 or
Yeah,
whatever. And so
yeah,
we started collecting stuff, and we were emailing every week, and it's a lot of work making a book. So we collected, 400 pages of his autobio stuff and sort of put
yeah.
that together. And then like it's all over the place. The second book was like a picture book that Esther had written that again, like, she had pitched and it didn't go anywhere. And so as far as she was concerned, it was done. And I was like, no, this is a great book. Let's do it. The
Yeah.
third one's like a writing about baseball. Like a friend of mine
Yeah,
from high
yeah.
school sends out like a yearly email that's really cool about baseball, which like I don't really care about. But I was like, he's never gonna make a book. It's just
Yeah.
emails to him. But like as a zinester, you can like see that it could be a book. So it's sort of um, those are the kind of projects. And I have 4 or 5 other things I want to do where
Oh,
someone's like
cool.
working on something and it's so cool and I want to share with people, but in their mind it's not a book. Or trying to reach out to other people in my life that
Yeah.
aren't in the comics community that would never think of making a book because they don't have any of
Yeah.
those skill sets. And it's like, hey, what if we took some of your thoughts? Or I've sent out like a forum letter to people that's like, you're one of my favorite people in the world. if you ever want to just like put a book together, I could help you do that. And so like there's like a math textbook that I've pitched to someone, like we could make a math textbook that you're working on, or someone that does like healing. It's like, I don't know, it's going to be the most like
Yeah.
inconsistent publishing venture,
No,
but
that's
yeah, I
great.
hope I can
Yeah.
get back to a place where I can do like one a year is the goal
Hmm. Yeah.
someday.
It's just
Time,
like that.
time. I just need more time,
Yeah.
Mama.
That's been my dream for so many years, and I've had like a couple false starts with it, and I don't know if it will really come. I always wanted to start this micro press which republishes people's mini comics where they only made like 100 or so, because
Yeah,
people like me love that stuff, and it's just kind of it's lost, or
yeah,
like there'll be a copy on eBay for like $70. Um, and I've like reached out to a few people, and if it's like trying to get enough people on board so it has like momentum, not just like, okay, this person wants to republish this 1999 comic, but then like this guy in France like is like, oh, sorry, someone's already kind of signed the contract with me. But
yeah.
yeah,
I did
I
that
think
with
it
Weezer. They used to do a fanzine in the 90s called
right.
Weezine, and I had a
Uh-huh.
complete run of them, which is very hard to come by.
Wow.
But it's like inaccessible. Like current Weezer fans don't even know that that stuff existed. So I worked with Carl, who's sort of the fifth member of Weezer, and we made two. It
Right.
was really cool. We made a cheap, inexpensive version. Am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear
Just
you. Yeah.
okay.
Um, yeah, it's back.
So we made like a just the same size, like a folded A4 of the zine that's black and white, and it's all 300 pages of all the zines from the 90s. And you can get it for $8 or whatever. Like Weezer fan club
Cool.
members can have that history. But then the really cool thing was
Yeah.
Carl had all the original pay stubs. Like because it was like real
Right.
zine days. So he's like
Yeah.
cutting
Yeah.
Polaroid photos and gluing it down on paper, whatever. He had all
Yeah.
those. So we scanned those and then made like a coffee table version that's like $100, but it's like all full color, all the layouts fully annotated, all the fan club pictures.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
this beautiful thing. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's like these small run things that were totally impossible to find. Scanning
Yeah.
those, doing print on demand, it's no work for us. It's just like on a
Hmm.
computer. But if someone wants it, they can get it and then they have access to that history. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you. I have other projects like other zine runs that I've actively sought out. I have one that is completely scanned and ready to go. I just got to find the time to get it together and then release
Right.
like a
Right.
updated version. But yeah, it's an important part of history. I know Robin Chapman's doing stuff like that, where she took
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Deep Girl and like brought those zines
Hmm.
back into sort of like a book format. So it's important work that a couple different people are doing.
I think it's going to time out in like 1 minute, like it'll cut
Okay.
us off. Emma had one question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite character? Sorry, what's your favorite comic that you've ever made? And I think also she was asking what's your favorite character you've ever made?
I like Isle of Elsie the most. And I
Hmm.
think Sally so far is my favorite character. I like how feisty she is, and sort of
Yeah.
she's a good antithesis to sort of Rex's intellectual whatever.
Yeah.
So
It's
she's a
great. It's
go-getter.
great. Yeah. Um,
Well, Mama, thank you so much for inviting me on here. This was super fun talking with you, and to finally see you face to face after
yeah.
a decade of correspondence.
Yeah. Yeah, once I get this stuff printed, I'll mail you some stuff back. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's great to finally like talk to you, Alec, after all these years. Yeah,
Yeah, it's great. And I've got some comics I'll send you too.
that would be awesome. Cool. Well, I'll speak to you soon. Enjoy your
Okay, thanks
day.
everybody for watching.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'll speak to you soon, Alec.
Okay, bye, Mama.
Take care. Bye.